right, Drew. Why don't you tell me the history of the Scarab starting back in 1987?
Well, a guy called me from Memphis, Tennessee, wanted a pair of mufflers and for his boat, and I sold him, and I asked him, I said, where do you buy a Scarab? Because he owned a Scarab, and he referred me to a dealer in Memphis, Tennessee, and sure enough, the guy flew up, and we did the deal, and ordered the boat.
How about you tell me, once you got the boat, what did you start doing to it once it landed in your hands?
Well, first of all, it had to be Ford powered, since I worked for Ford Racing at the time, and all the boats supplied at that time were Chevrolet powered. So I couldn't order the boat with no power. I had to order it with power. So I ordered the smallest Chevrolet motors and took them out immediately when I got here and built 2 original Ford motors for it.
How many motors did you put in that boat before it was all final and good to go?
Originally I had 2 466 cubic inch 600 horse motors in it. Had those in and out numerous times, mostly for testing, because this was the first. And so from that time till current time, I probably had at least 10 different combinations of engines in the boat.
How did you, what was your biggest thing with the engine when it came to the horsepower? What was your end goal with that boat?
Well, these boats, it isn't just horsepower that matters, it's torque. Torque makes horsepower, horsepower doesn't make torque. So we started with 466 cubic inch, and then I decided to raise the limit a little bit. So back in about 88, is when I built the first 605 cubic inch motors, which are currently what's in it displacement wise, but design wise, no.
Once you got this boat complete, and you were getting ready to hand it off, and you found Doc, what was your end goal with him being satisfied?
Well, my end goal is obviously reliability, because in an offshore boat it's different than a car or somebody that drag races or whatever, because people are on the throttles for a long period of time. So when Doc bought the boat, I had basically the final version of the 605 SVO Fords, and they're currently in the boat. And these motors use Ford Racing high nickel, high chrome alloy blocks, Siamese cylinders, blade caps. Crankshafts in them are made by Scat. The rods are H-beam, made by Scat, Vinolia pistons. But what's really nice is the cylinder heads. Those are some of the original Pro Stock aluminum high port cylinder heads. The term was called an A460. Well, that's what built the horsepower, was the cylinder heads along with the cubic inches. And so when Doc bought it for me, that's what it had in it. And since then, we've just, as needed, freshened things up.
So now that Doc is preparing to sell this boat and get it into someone else's hands, and this is, for one, a really special boat for anyone to get their hands on, what is someone getting that they don't know that they're getting once they get their hands on this? What's the biggest thing?
Well, to start with, the hull is a genuine 38 Larry Smith hull. At that time, Wellcraft owned the trademark on the name Scarab. So the hull is a Larry Smith hull. The deck was made in Sarasota, Florida by Wellcraft, and the interior was done by Wellcraft, but the engine was done by us in Spokane, Washington. So it's pretty much an original boat, with the exception of a new transom that's modernized over the old wood type transom, and obviously the Arneson surface drives, which are basically just indestructible.
So with everything that you've said, just with the engines, what is the value of that if someone's going to have to replace that in this day and age?
Well, I would say that it depends on how you drive them. If you get all liquored up and just keep it to the wood all the time, you're going to pay the price. If you drive it respectfully, cruise at 3,500 RPM and get on it for short periods of time, it should last a long time. And the engines probably have about 35 to 45 hours on them since they were freshened up. And what I mean by freshened up, I mean new valves, new rings, new pistons, new crank, new rods, the whole, everything that's inside the motors.
What I was going to ask, what do you think the value is? Like, a number, a price?
Well, I've been building engines for 60 years. I'm 77 years old. And I can tell you right now that these motors today, no matter where you went in the country with the components that are in them, are going to cost you $100,000 each in today's world. So that's something to think about. So you want to keep things together, and when you need maintenance, do it so that you don't have to go through that.
And then if you were going to get your hands on this particular Scarab, what would it cost to get that without the engines?
Pardon me, how much would it cost?
To get that shell without the engines, if you could find one.
Just the shell and no engines. You could probably find one out there. There are a few around, and I'm thinking in just the hull, less the motors, and we'll call it the motors and drives, probably in the 50, 60 range. But there's none out there in this type of condition. This is a freshwater boat, which simply means where we live up here, we run it 2-3 months a year, and the rest of it sits. So I doubt very seriously if a person would ever find anything close. And I might add too, this was the only genuine black 38 Scarab ever built.
So why don't you tell me what's original in the boat, and then what you have replaced on it?
Okay. The boat, as I mentioned earlier, is an original black gel coat boat. But the deck and the sides have been painted with black Imron. And the bottom has been speed coated. That's a graphite to increase your speed a few miles an hour. The upholstery is original from '87. And the gauges are original from '87. They're Kaiser Medallion gauges, which Kaiser Medallion only made them for marine and aircraft. And currently they don't make them anymore. The cabin has been modernized, updated down underneath. And the engine room is been completely redone from when the boat was purchased in '87. And some of it I did, the majority of it Doc did himself. He's an expert rigger, I'll call it, down in there. But a lot of changes were made when Doc put the Arneson drives in. We had to move the motors back a foot. And so obviously everything had to be repositioned in the boat. And so Doc handled most of that.
And then why don't you also talk about the livable area underneath the boat? What's that like?
Well, that's pretty standardized for a 38-40 footer. It's got a deep V berth up front, which 2 people could easily sleep. And then it's got 2 couches per se, and refrigerator, and a sink. No bathroom, so porta potty would have to be used there.
And one more thing, why don't you just give one solid memory that you have of it and that stands out the most?
Well, probably were the memories is when Hot Boat decided to do a story on this boat back in '89. That's probably one of the fondest memories that I had of this boat. The other was, it was the first genuine offshore boat on Lake Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, here where I live. And then after that boat was running, 60 more turned up in a period of 10 years.